This diagram you received in class, and it shows that the menstrual cycle takes place over 28 days. Day 1 starts the process of menstruation, so it doesn't matter which day of the month it is. For the body, for this timeline, day 1 is the day that it will start her period. It lasts usually on average about 5 days. Now when day 1 happens and the menstrual cycle starts, the pituitary gland realizes that there wasn't a pregnancy, and it starts secreting a hormone called FSH. FSH is secreted for about 2 weeks to stimulate the follicle to produce an ovum. Now the follicle is properly known as the Graafian follicle. On day 14, the Graafian follicle is large and the ovum inside is fully mature. So the pituitary gland then secretes its second hormone called luteinizing hormone. Only on day 14 it is secreted, which is going to cause that Graafian follicle to rupture and release the mature ovum. This is called ovulation. So the release of that ovum, which only occurs on day 14. Now, once ovulation has occurred, the ruptured follicle forms a little patch of scar tissue called the corpus luteum. So during the first 14 days, oogenesis happens. In other words, the formation of the ovum. While on day 14, ovulation happens, the release of this ovum. Don't get confused between the terms oogenesis and ovulation. Now, if you look at the bottom of the underneath of the timeline, you can actually see during oogenesis and during the development of the Graafian follicle, the follicle itself actually secretes estrogen. And once ovulation has happened and the corpus luteum is formed, the corpus luteum secretes progesterone. And both estrogen and progesterone causes the endometrium to thicken and become more vascular, which means it prepares the uterus for implantation in case you fall pregnant. The changes in the concentration or the blood levels of the 4 hormones we just learnt about can be shown in a graph like this. So the color coding is given there, so you will probably not be asked to draw a graph like this, but you will be asked to actually identify them on a graph, and it's pretty simple. I usually start with luteinizing hormone. Because we know that it's only secreted on day 14, you'll notice that it's pretty much a straight line, except you've got a peak on day 14. Progesterone is also pretty easy to identify because we know progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum after it was formed on day 14. So you'll actually see a pretty much very little progesterone, and then it starts peaking or start lifting in the second half of the menstrual cycle. So you see the peak after day 14. Follicle stimulating hormone, as we learned, is secreted in the first 2 weeks because it forms the follicle, it produces the ovum in the first 2 weeks. So you'll actually see a rise in the hormone level of FSH before day 14, and then it levels out afterwards. I know it's got this little bump in the middle, but don't let that put you off. It's higher in the first 2 weeks and low in the second 2 weeks. Estrogen fluctuates quite a bit, so it rises just before day 14 and kind of makes 2 peaks after that. So the last line that I would try to identify when I'm identifying all of them would be estrogen by looking at the 2 peaks or the 2 bumps it makes. So there's various changes that the endometrium, the uterus and the ovaries go through, as well as the levels of hormones as they change during this 28-day cycle. So we can actually divide the cycle in 4 steps. So the first 5 days, the first phase is menstruation, which is followed by the follicle phase, then ovulation, and then the last phase, which is called the luteal or the secretory phase.